welcome to On the Bauble podcast, episode 32. I'm your host, Sabasa J. Ueda, and with me is my co-host, Yuki Lee Bender. Today, we're going to be talking about how to draft the ninja class in the Outsiders draft. And we're going to be going into both Benji and Katsu, and the cards you should be looking for during the draft format to both get into it and what kind of decks we think are good for this class. But before we go into that, how was your week, Yuki?
My week's been pretty good. Very, very busy. Got back from Chicago last weekend, and then I left on Friday, I guess. Friday night. I left on Friday night to go to Toronto. I left at 11 p.m., did the red eye, got there at like 8 a.m. or something. And yeah, I was in Toronto once again, this time for my grandmother's 100th birthday, which was awesome. It was really good to see all the family, and people don't turn 100 very often, so it's a pretty big deal. It was really nice to see everyone. We had like 50 people come out, and it was just like good solid family time, but it was very brief, I guess. Just, get in on the Saturday, stay the Sunday, leave on the Monday, and they were pretty jam-packed days. I was doing things like pretty much all day, hanging out with my cousin. So it was really fun, but I haven't had that much time for Flesh and Blood. I did a couple armories, but like not on that weekend, but yeah, it was a pretty good week. Just busy.
Congratulations to your grandmother for turning 100. That is a pretty big milestone.
Yeah, absolutely. How about you? How's your week been, Jay?
For myself, if you follow our YouTube channel, I did post like a draft video that we did, or at least I did, with the Savage Land guys. Looks like I am going to be doing one more of it this week as well, with a slightly different members. Hopefully I can 3-0 this time. But if you want to check that out, that will be on our YouTube channel, on the Bauble, if you want to check us out. And we also on Sunday did 4 drafts of Outsiders. The local guys are preparing for the Pro Tour coming up in Baltimore, so it's just draft practice for that. And I think we had some good takeaways from that draft, honestly. Like, it was pretty productive. I think the main thing would be all 6 heroes pretty playable and worth considering in this format. And it's not like in Uprising draft where I think most of the Vancouver crew was on let's force Fi and try and, get the most broken Fi deck because I just had like one of the highest win percentage. And depending on your pool, if there was like, Fi was undervalued by any of the players at that pool, you could get like a broken Fi deck and 3-0 the pod. But it doesn't seem like that's the case in this format, and you really need to be aware of what cards are getting taken, even if these packs are a little bit hard to figure out.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of that, that the classes are close enough that if you're in the open lane or like the right deck for your seat, I think you get hugely rewarded for it. And I think that learning to read the signals, even with the sort of less predictable collation, is a really valuable skill to have.
I guess before we move on to our main topic, do you want to talk about the collation?
Yeah. So actually, maybe before we talk about collation, I have a question for you. How many of each class do you think there should be in a pod? Because, like, I guess what I'm thinking is, like, I feel like in Outsiders, the draft sort of supported like 2 Dromais, but you really didn't want to be the third. And kind of similar with Icelander, like two Icelanders was pretty good, and the third was pretty bad. And then like 3 Fi was like really solid, and the 4th Fi was starting to get not so great. What do you think those numbers look like in Outsiders, at least right now?
From what we've tested so far, I think it ends up being around like 4 assassins, 2 ninjas, 2 ranger, and you don't really want to be the 4th assassin. So it might be pretty similar to Outsiders in that sense. Sorry, Uprising in that sense. But I think that might just be a product of there being more assassin cards in the set than any other class.
Yeah, I think I agree, and I also think the generics tend to fit in like a lot of like the 2 for 6s and stuff. I think their best home is actually an assassin. I don't really think you want like the cut down to sizes in your ninja deck or your ranger decks. Ideally, like maybe the red ones like maybe playable in some of them, but it's not really where I want to be.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. the generics, the assassin ranger and the assassin ninja cards are all not mainly, but like they are definitely playable in the assassin decks, and you do get mileage out of them. So when you end up like picking up a generic to like quote unquote stay open, you end up like slightly leaning towards assassin, and then if there isn't like a go signal to go into ranger or ninja, it might be safer to stick with assassins. But I think the problem with this format though is like unlike in Uprising where Fi was like a very very strong deck where you're like favored to go 3-0 when you have a good version of it. That's really not the case with this format where I don't feel like Assassin is actually that powerful, and you'd actually just rather be a powerful ninja deck or a powerful ranger deck than be a middling or like a the number 3 assassin deck, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think Azuri in particular feels like incredibly safe. Like you have a really high floor, but your ceiling is also not that high. And I think Arachne can be pretty strong if you get like the really strong Arachne version. But I agree that like if I could like build my draft deck essentially like with whatever cards I wanted, like I'd want to be getting either the really strong ninja deck or the really strong ranger deck. I think those are like when they come together, I think they are the strongest decks in the format, or at least that's kind of my initial gut feeling. I think the assassins are like a little bit higher floor but lower ceiling. Like if you want a 2-1 year draft though, I think assassin's pretty safe.
Yeah, it's the safest thing you can do, or at least like start with some generics and then make sure those generics are playable in assassin, so like you end up with at least 30 cards in your deck.
And then I guess we can talk about the pack collation.
Yeah, so looks like there's two different prints in this for the set. We have the Japanese print and the Belgium print. They apparently are slightly different. So depending on where your boxes come, they will differ on what kind of cards you can, or what kind of class cards, or like how do I explain this better?
Yeah, I think just like the distribution of the cards that you see in the pack depend on whether the packs are manufactured in Belgium or they're manufactured in Japan. I believe that Belgium is always paper packs and Japan is always plastic packs. I know that for sure Japan doesn't have paper packs. But yeah, they are fairly different. My understanding is that the biggest differences are so you always have 3 to 4 generics and then 5 or 6 class cards. My understanding is that Japan is almost always 2 2 2, so 2 of each class, and that Belgium can have up to 3 of any class. Like there'll be 3 2 1s, and sometimes you can even get 0 of a class and wind up with like 3 3 0. So it can make it appear as if something is not open when in reality there was just never any class commons of that particular class.
Yeah, to go into a little bit more detail of the Belgium, because that is the boxes that I've been drafting with.
Mhm.
So there's 14 cards in the pack. There is one foil, and the foil can only contain cards that are originally printed in this set. So all the reprints cannot come in foil, or do not come in foil. So you don't get Seek Horizon Red. You can't get Seek Horizon in foil. You can't get Ravenous Rabble in foil. You can't get Come to Fight in foil. Those generics don't come in foil. There is the one equipment slot that is just consistent throughout both Japanese and Belgium. There is one rare slot that is a rare or a mythic, and then there is technically two hybrid slots. One should be Ninja Assassin, and the other one should be Ranger Assassin. But these can be replaced by rares of a specific class. I don't think it can be replaced by an assassin, but I may be wrong in that. From what I can see, it can get replaced by a Ninja M or a Ninja R, or it can be the Ranger Assassin slot can be replaced by a Ranger R or a Ranger M, but not an Assassin M. From at least what I've seen so far, which is why you have multiple rare or mythic packs, and it can get quite confusing on what gets picked, and you do need to be very aware when you get multiple rare packs, as the second rare in the pack could have replaced these dual class cards.
Yeah, it's possible to get one rare packs, two rare packs, or three rare packs, and you don't necessarily know. Like especially if you're taking a pack that has had some cards taken from it, you don't necessarily know like which of those three options the pack was to begin with.
And specifically for the Belgium prints, you could open two of the exact same cards in your pack. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be like they don't have to be like a foil version or a non-foil version. You could technically open like two of the exact same class cards with the same pitch.
Yeah, I've also seen that as well. How do you feel about this overall? So we kind of talked about like there is a difference between the print runs. The Belgium, I think, is less predictable. What do you think about this in terms of like what it means for the limited format? Is this a good thing?
My initial take is I would prefer it to be a little bit more consistent, so then it makes reading the pack a little bit more impactful, and we will actually get like a because of the Belgium print run being so erratic, you could get a pod where it's probably correct to be like the three ranger pod, or like a even maybe even like a four ranger pod if all the packs are weighted towards ranger, which I don't think is a net positive overall, but it does give some interesting decision points of like when you see a three pack ranger, when you open a three ranger cards and no, let's say, ninja cards, it is a not a cool thing, but like an interesting thing to note on your wheel to make sure that you are like properly recognizing what cards have been taken and what cards haven't been taken.
Yeah, I think I agree that the wheel in particular in this set is really, really valuable. Even if you can't remember, if you find it hard to remember like all the cards in the pack, even just counting like three ranger, two assassin, one ninja, three generics, and then there's like two hybrid cards or whatever. Like if you count that and you can kind of figure out like, well, there was only one ranger card taken, that's like a useful piece of information. So I think you're kind of looking for that.
Yeah, that's probably the only thing you can do. And the other thing would be like don't base any of your decision off of one individual pack. You have to base your information through multiple packs because there are multiple very powerful cards. There can be multiple very powerful red lines for a single class, and just because there's a card you would have first picked is still in a pack that's like, pack one, pick four, doesn't necessarily mean that hero isn't getting drafted.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think I mostly agree with you, but I might differ a little bit in that I don't know if I actually dislike this. I think that it's actually okay. And in some ways, I kind of like it. It just feels like you need to kind of rely more on context rather than just like counting cards and like in Uprising, you could like pretty much like count cards and figure out almost exactly what was at the table. And I think it being like a little bit more contextual and needing to rely on like more data points does make for like a pretty rich drafting experience. Like in a lot of ways, it feels closer to drafting Magic to me, where you're more looking for like not just like a powerful card that maybe comes late, but also like consistent signals. So like I might note like, oh, I'm drafting Ranger and now I don't see much Ranger. That could mean that there's Ranger's cut. It could also mean that this pack just had weak Ranger cards, and maybe I speculate on something else, and I get a little. That way, I have options. You know, like if it's like pick four, like maybe I speculate on another class card, and it gives me some options down the line to see is Ranger continuing to be cut, in which case somebody's probably drafting it, or was it just that pack and then Ranger's back open again, and I can actually just continue drafting Ranger. So I actually kind of like the variability in it, but I do think it's perhaps a little bit awkward that there's like two different types of packs and we don't know which one's going to be used for Pro Tour, and that part's like not great. But I actually don't mind the more variability in packs. I think I kind of like it overall.
Do you like it because it's like an extra hurdle you have to like pass through?
I just think, hmm, I guess I just feel like drafting the like when you're reading signals, I kind of like it being a little bit more like contextual and feels based than just like purely here's how many cards are missing and you can like count exactly what people are in. And I guess that's kind of where I said it like reminds me of Magic Draft, where I think like in Magic Draft, like you're not really looking to be like, oh, like you're not like counting like how many of each color there is. Like sometimes you do know like density and like that can all matter, but you're not really being like, oh, there's like clearly like this color drafter because there's like one card missing from that class, like or from that color. Like that's not really what you're doing. It's more about like trying to find the cards that fit into your deck and making sure that the archetype that you're drafting is open. And I feel like that's kind of the like from the limited drafting I've done, that's kind of the vibe that I get from Outsiders is that it's a lot more about understanding like which deck is open for your seat. And it's like a little bit I don't know. I just found the counting of the class cards just like a little bit on the nose. And like when the collation got super figured out in Uprising, I don't know that I didn't like super love it. Like it just made the draft feel really on rails because you can just be like, okay, there's like a Fi and an Icelander passing to me, so I guess I'm gonna pick Dromai, and like that's fine. It just felt a little formulaic and stale. Whereas I feel like this feels a little bit more. There's more to think about in the draft format or in the draft process in particular, which I've been enjoying. But I don't know. Maybe my opinion will change when I draft it more.
That's fair. That's fair. It is. It's not. Yeah, I do agree with you on Uprising. It did feel that way, and it felt a little bit worse too because it's just like almost always like, oh, I see two Fi cards missing, so I can't be Fi, and I'll be like, which one do I want to be, Dromai or Icelander? Or I'll be like, oh, the guy to my left isn't Fi, so I guess I pick a Fi card. And it does if you
Yeah.
do like multiple drafts a week, it does get stale very quickly.
Yeah. Maybe this is something we should definitely revisit this a little down the road. I'll be curious to see how we both feel when we've drafted this set. Like, because right now, like, I'm probably at like 5 to 6 drafts. You're at like what? Like,
I've done about 11, 10.
yeah, I was gonna say like 10ish. Yeah. So, I'd still say that we're kind of in like the getting a feel for the draft format where like it usually feels like pretty good, but you're also getting your first impressions. And I'll be curious to see where we're at after like 30 drafts, 50 drafts kind of thing. How are we going to feel about the draft format down the road?
Yeah, that's true. What's really funny though is you say this like I'm like 10 drafts in, you're like 5 drafts in, and like to some casual drafters, like that's the number of drafts they do like in a month or like 2 months of the format.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of people who may only draft the format 5 times or 10 times, and that's all that they do. So, it's all contextual. Jay and I are definitely pretty hardcore limited players, I guess you could say. And I'd imagine that there's a range in our listeners, but I would imagine that already, if you're listening to limited podcasts or limited oriented podcasts, you're probably like at least a little more enthusiastic or interested in draft than like the average player, I would imagine.
That's fair. That's fair. Okay, let's move on to our main topic, which is how to draft Ninja. Let's start with like a general playstyle of Ninja. What do you think you're looking to do in the Ninja deck?
Yeah, so I think sort of like I guessed from the sealed episode, I think that Ninja, due to a lot of cards blocking two, usually wants to be aggressively oriented. I find like a lot of my hands, I might have like like 1 3 block I can block with, and otherwise I pretty much want to be playing my cards. Like all your 2 blocks are much better on offense than defense, so it does usually mean that you're aggressively leaning. I think that there are some ninja decks sometimes that have more 3 blocks, and those are probably the better ones because you have a little more flexibility. But generally, you are going to be leaning aggressive just due to the low 2 block count.
The high two block count.
Or sorry, high 2 block count, low 3 block count. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It's Ninja. I think in this format is the aggressive deck. I guess in almost every format, Ninja is tend to be the most aggressive deck. The main thing I think with Ninja would be how can you utilize Kodachi very not well, but like how do you utilize Kodachi well? and I think that just comes with you need to have the zero cost blues, and I guess you need about what, 8 blues? Is that right?
Yeah, I think I usually want like you maybe can get away with 7 if you have a high yellow count and you're it kind of depends a bit on like what your cost curve is like. If you have a lot of zeros, like some more yellows is okay. But yeah, I think I'm usually looking for at least about 8 blues.
8 blues, yeah. I think that just will be a good benchmark of like looking for how many blues you want is like, yeah, 8 blues. Then you have about 1 blue a hand, and then you can turn that into a into damage very very consistently with this deck.
Yeah, you have like a lot of one cost, so you can do like Kodachi Kodachi one cost, or if you have a surging line, you can do Kodachi Surging Strike. Just like the extra resource from pitching a blue is almost always worth the damage from Kodachi, and the Kodachis are like pretty close to unblockable. If your opponent's blocking Kodachis, like you're very very happy. So it's like pretty close to unblockable damage.
Yeah, it's very good. The Let's talk about cards that you want, or like good cards in the set at common and rare for ninjas. Let's start off with the hybrid cards actually, because these are probably the cards you're gonna be picking early. And I guess before we move into that, let's talk a little bit about how we think some of these hybrid cards fit in this format. Actually,
I think that a lot of the hybrid cards, and actually even a lot of the generic cards too, while they are technically playable, like the generics are playable in all 3 decks, and the hybrids are playable in like the assassin ninja cards are both assassin and ninja cards, and you can play them. I've found that a lot of them are often kind of like secret class cards where they really fit best into one deck. And there's some notable exceptions to these that are like more flexible. And I think the ones that fit into multiple decks are probably like among the best cards to be picking in the set because they are so flexible. But there's like a lot of these generics and hybrid cards that depending on what deck you're playing, you don't really want them.
yeah, it's just like as an example, I think cut down to size yellow is a card that is playable in all 6 heroes, but the yellow one is I think actively pretty bad in rangers. It is not a card I want in ninjas that often. It's like begrudgingly playable, and in assassins, in Arachne, I wouldn't really like it, but then in Uzuri, this card is like I would actively want as many yellow cut down to sizes as I could get my hands on. So like even just this one generic card, just a yellow cut down a size, it technically can go in all 6 decks, but it really feels like a Uzuri class card.
Yeah. And I think that I think like one of the things, if you're not already doing this, that you should start doing and will reward you a lot if you start doing it is thinking about not just like what decks can this card fit into to the class, but like what deck do you want it in and what deck does it excel in? Because a lot of these excel in like only one class or only one hero sometimes, even kind of like Jay was talking about with cut down to size. And we don't have time to go into all of them. We can touch on some of them as they come up throughout the episodes, but I think just like the more that you're thinking about this and trying to place them in their ideal homes, the better you're going to do in this format. That being said, maybe we should talk about the assassin ninja cards. I think that like one example is I think Bleed Out is an extremely good ninja card. Especially the red one. It's pretty close to Blaze Headlong actually in Ninja because they really don't want to block your Kodachis. And it's pretty easy for you to go Kodachi, Kodachi. They're not going to block it. Then Bleed Out's free because it gets reduced by X, where X is the total damage dealt by daggers. And then it's just a 4 for 0 go again, which is like basically a Blaze Headlong. It's premium and extremely good in Ninja. And I think you can pick it early. But I think that this card is like, I don't want this in my assassin deck. And the big reason is that people are actually incentivized to block your spider's bites. And the 2 cost is really awkward because if you're ever, like, let's say that you're trying to go pitch a blue, spider's bite, bleed out. If they block that spider's bite because they don't want to have their like hand nerfed or they want to be blocking with multiple cards, you suddenly can't play your bleed out anymore without pitching an entire extra card. And it's like even the red one is like pretty close to unplayable in Ninja, I feel like. Or sorry, in Assassin, I feel like it's like really bad, whereas it's really, really good in Ninja.
Yeah, like your best case scenario, or not a best case scenario, but like a average scenario for this card is Spider's Bite hitting, then it's a 1 for 4 go again, which is like honestly pretty good if that's the case, but it being a super conditional 1 for 4 go again is a little bit not where you want to be, I guess is what I want to say.
Yeah, like you just get stuck in these spots where like you wanted to play the card and you actually can't play it unless you pitch an entire extra card. And because you don't have control over it, like it's not something you set up, it just depends how your opponent blocks. So it ends up being like really, really poor. That being said, which class cards are you looking for in Ninja? Sorry, hybrid class cards.
Out of the Ninja Assassin, at least commons and rares, I'm gonna be looking at Hurl. Hurl's gonna the I think the premium card. This is technically good in Assassin as well, but Hurl Red, Hurl Yellow, and Hurl Blue I think are all good in all your Ninja decks. The blue Hurls enable your Kodachis and is good in your pitch deck, and the red hurls is just a 0 for 3 go again with an optional pay one deal one damage. It's like close to unblockable in this format.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I will say that I think Hurl gets worse in multiples pretty quickly. Like the first like two copies of Hurl is really good. I actually like somehow wound up in a draft where I had like five Hurls. It might have been an assassin deck, but you really like it's still fine. But like if you think about it in the context of Ninja, if you have too many hurls and you're not planning, like you're not getting the upside of the pay one, it's like a head jab that doesn't combo. So I think that like hurl is a premium pick, and I'm happy to pick it early, but there is some kind of upper limit. I think about two is like the first two I'm like reasonably higher on than the third or higher, the third or fourth.
I didn't even I didn't even think you can get more than 1 or 2 hurls like during a draft, but you got 5 in a draft?
I got five. I think I had like two red, a yellow, and two blues or something. It was a very weird draft. Like I don't know if that's going to happen as people learn more and more about the set. Like it was like one of the first drafts I ever did. But yeah, for whatever it's worth, if for some reason you see multiples of this rare, it does get worse in multiples.
Okay, that's something I didn't actually like what's it called think about until you told me, but yeah, I guess you are right. You don't really want like 4 hurls in your deck. You do want like you 2 is a good number though.
Yeah.
2 is a good number to have.
Yeah, two is very good. Like I didn't think about it either. I was like, man, my deck's insane. And then I was like drawing all these hurls, and I was like, this is not that good. Like it's okay.
It's like yellow head jab is so medium.
Yeah, like it's fine. It's just yeah, the first two is like pretty exciting, and after that, it's kind of yeah.
That's fair. And I think the other hybrid card that I'm keeping my eye out is Short and Sharp Red. The yellow and the blue is a little bit, they don't have enough impact, but the Short and Sharp Red, they always work with your Kodachis to give +3. And as we keep on saying, Kodachi is like quite close to unblockable. So being able to have just like a 1 for 3 unblockable is pretty it's pretty big game. The only thing that can block it really is like Ranger with the defense reactions, and not like when they have the defense reaction to your short and sharp, it feels pretty bad. But a lot of the times, it's not like they get to line up your defense reaction to your attack reaction, and this card just goes a long way when you need to either like sneak in damage or have something with an on hit. So I think this is like one of the more premium cards, and because it's hybrid, it can help you stay a little bit more open like early in your draft too. So I think this is a pretty high pick in Ninja in the Assassin Ninja hybrid cards, and particularly good in Ninja.
I haven't been drafting this card highly, but hearing you talk about it makes a lot of sense. And I've been thinking on my most recent draft that I kind of wanted this card. Another thing that comes up with this is just like turn zero, if they short and sharp their Kodachi, like, because like often you can't block the first Kodachi, and if they just Kodachi short and sharp and you just take four turn zero, it's it's like really bad. It actually happened to me. Yeah, it's just like, I just lose four life. Okay.
The other spot where this card is pretty sick in is exactly Benji. Short and Sharp's second line of text is attack. Action card with 2 or less base power gets +3. You can just attack for 2, they can't block it, and it's just pump 3, they take 5. It ends games.
Yeah, the other thing I think that's really relevant against Benji is like a lot of people actually bring in brush offs against you, which are pretty good. And like sometimes if they brush off your yellow be like water that you're relying to hit to get your combo line, like it feels bad. But if they brush it off and you short and sharp, like it's like I think they just lose. Like they're because brush off doesn't prevent 3 damage, it prevents it if it's 3 or less. So if you make it like up to a 5 and their brush off just doesn't do anything and they just discarded it, like that's almost game losing. So
Yeah, attempt to block with this block with this card. Oh, actually, you that card blocks for 0 now and you take extra damage.
yeah, it seems very, very good. So this is definitely a card I want to draft a little more highly, I think.
And let's move on. I think that. Oh, sorry. Before we move on, any other ninja assassin hybrid cards you like?
I think those are the main ones. We also touched on Bleed Out. Like I mentioned, Bleed Out was pretty close to Blaze Headlong and Ninja. I think Red Bleed Out is like strong enough that I'm willing to first pick it. I don't think it's like the best first pick, but
It's close. It's pretty
it's
close.
close. Yeah, like certainly in like the first 3 picks, like I'm pretty happy to take a Red Bleed Out again, like as a Ninja card. It's not really much of a hybrid card.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the generics that you're gonna be looking for. I think the main generics you want in the ninja class is any of the one cost generic and hopefully cards like looking for a scrap. So this one is the 1 for 4 and it gets +1 if you banish a 1 power. As long as you can enable this card, I think this is a premium card in ninja. It's just a 1 for 5 go again. As long as you can trigger or fulfill its secondary cost. Otherwise, a card spring loaded is a I think a pretty good card as a if you have a 0 cost blue, you can go Kodachi spring load for 5, which is like a 2 card 7, which is pretty hard to come by in this format and is pretty good for like a I don't know how to explain it. It's just like super on rate.
Yeah, I think in general, most of the classes are not that good at being on rate. And anytime you are like on rate, like the constructed on rate, where it's like every card is worth 3 and your action point is worth 1. So like 2 card 7, you have 2 cards, both worth 3, action points worth 1. Anytime you can be on rate, it feels very powerful in this format. And if you're ever above rate, it feels like game winning almost. So
Yeah, it feels like you cheated.
yeah. So just like I agree that Ninja is actually very good at being on rate and just like finding as many ways as possible to be on rate, the better you're gonna do with Ninja.
And a card that I think that you want in Ninja, which I don't know if a lot of people agree with me yet, is a card called Freewheeling Renegades. This is a 1 for 6, and if it's defended by an action card, this card gets -2. I think this is secretly like, or sorry, I do need to specify only the red one here. The yellow and the blue I wouldn't play, but specifically the red one, I feel like is a secret like ninja, not a high priority, but like a card you actively want and is pretty happy to pick on, pick 7, pick 8, somewhere after people's been picking up the class cards and the 3 blocks and stuff. You're like, oh, red freewheeling renegades, this is exactly what I want for my deck. Just like a chain ender that's like a 1 for 4 is fine. It's like, I think it's almost actively good.
Yeah, I haven't been picking this card highly, but it makes a lot of sense, and it's a card that I've been like decently happy with in general. I think like you said, 1 for 4 is pretty good, but it's actually like a little better than a 1 for 4, right? It's a 1 for 4 that like kind of forces your opponent to block it.
Yeah.
They don't have to, but like if they don't, like it's a 1 for 6, which is just crazy. And I think that like Ninja doesn't really like blocking. Ranger likes blocking sometimes, but like very selectively. And I think just like sometimes forcing them to feel like they need to block or lose big value when they don't want to is like pretty strong. Like if you're making them choose between, I have this like head jab that I'd like to, it's like a red head jab, I'd like to play it for 3, but instead I have to block with it for 2, because otherwise I like miss out on that like 2 points on the freewheeling renegade. Like that is pretty strong. Like you've actually cost them. You've kind of like made them lose a point of efficiency, so it becomes more like that 1 for 5. And I think just like anytime you can kind of force your opponent to block is pretty strong.
Yeah, and speaking of head jab, a line that I really enjoy with Freewheeling Renegade is like, obviously you use your Kodachis earlier in the turn, but if you attack with a head jab, they're somewhat forced to block with they're forced to block your head jab if you're a Katsu and if you have a card in hand still. Or like unless they get to like unless they're planning to block out the combo card that comes after. If they block the head jab respecting the Katsu trigger, and then you attack with the freeing renegades, it kind of is quite awkward to like break up your hand to block this card.
Yeah. And I think it having to be an action card can matter as well. Like a lot of the ninjas are drafting like rainbow razor's edges. And I think the card's very good. It always blocks for 3. You can just like tack it on to a stealth effect to push an on hit. It's really, really good. But that's like often a card they want to be blocking with. And if you just like this doesn't the power doesn't get turned off by reactions, or similarly it doesn't get turned off by defense reactions. So if they're just wanting to block with their one defense reaction, like they're not getting full value out of that card.
Yeah, and that does happen enough. Attack for 1 for 6. They block for just like with just razor's edge, and they still take 3. It's I think this card is like secretly a very premium ninja card, and I think people are sleeping on it at least for now.
Yeah.
And I think one last card I just want to talk about real quick is feisty locals. Specifically the blue ones to enable your Kodachi. Out of all of the generics you're looking for to enable your Kodachi, like for your blue count, I think Feisty Local Blue is the zero cost blue at common or rare that you're looking for to play. Maybe Infectious Host might be a close second, but I
Mm-hmm.
do really like the blue Feisty Locals because it is a 1 power card that can turn on looking for a scrap when you do end up opening this card a little bit later. And surprisingly, it's hard to get 1 power card in your graveyard to enable looking for a scrap. And just like increasing that number of 1 power blue zeros is somewhat important. And I would pick feisty local if I had a choice between like a feisty locals and an infectious host. I'll probably be picking up the feisty locals blue before that.
Ooh, interesting. I'm not sure where I'm at between those two specific cards, but yeah, I definitely agree. Like if you compare it to like Seek Horizon, which is also like a 0 for 2, I think I'm also on Feisty Locals Blue over it because of looking for scraps.
Okay, now let's move on to just the being these heroes specifically. Like what how does Benji play like, or is there specific cards that Benji's looking for?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think I'm still figuring this out to some degree. I've drafted Benji twice and I've actually never been Katsu, but I think that the cards that make me feel like I'm Benji instead of Katsu in particular are yellow Twin Twisters and yellow Be Like Water, I think are really, really key. The Twin Twisters line is just very, very strong. So you often pick the if this hits, your next attack gets +1 on your Twin Twisters, and if you can do that and line it up with like the follow up back heel kick, which is a 3 for 0, then whenever it gains power, it gains that much +1 if it combos with Twin Twisters. You can go like Kodachi Kodachi, yellow Twin Twisters. My next thing gets +1. Then back heel kick gets 2 from the Benji trigger and 2 from the Twin Twisters trigger, and it comes in for 7. So you're doing like 1, 1, 2, 7, which is 3 cards for 11 damage, and like 4 of it, like the 2 Kodachis and the Twin Twisters are like pretty much unblockable, and then the back heel kick they like kind of have to block. And I think anytime, like I think the key to Benji is like you want to be like poking with this yellow starter that they can't block to chip them, and then you want to be having a follow up that they feel like they have to block, ideally with multiple cards, and that kind of helps make up for you having really mediocre defense. Like you want to play your like 3 card hands, block with a 3 block, and then do this like 3 card hand that comes in for like 10 or like or 8, or like you just want to be like pretty good on rate, and that's kind of what I think the deck's trying to do.
Yeah. Benji, because it starts with 17 life, if you aren't being either on rate or above rate, you could fall behind if your opponent is presenting, just like, even if they're presenting, like, if they're trading damage with you, you're gonna fall behind because you have 3 less life. You just need some way to be above rate one way or another. So exactly as you said, like 3 card 11s, 2 card 7s. You just need to be looking for these specifically, or you're gonna fall behind.
Yeah. The other lines that the kind of like common play patterns that I really like in Benji, I think the head jab finishers are also really good in red. So 1-2 punch and repost, the red, I think are both really, really solid. And I think you want these in red because if you do the yellow head jab or you do like a yellow be like water, you go like Kadachi, Kadachi, be like water, pay 1, naming head jab, and then you come in with 1-2 punch for 4. That's like, okay, so you've done a 3 card 8, but if they don't block 1-2 punch, it's an extra 2 damage. So it's actually a 3 card 10. And the breakpoint of 4 pretty much demands 2 cards. Like they technically can give you an equipment, but because Benji has like all this unblockable 2 powers and like your twin, like your yellow twin twisters and stuff, I think if you're getting a card and equipment, you're actually pretty happy. And I think like repost is good for exactly the same reason. Or is it repost? No, it's recoil.
Recoil.
Recoil. I don't know what I'm on about. Anyways, recoil's the head jab combo ender that comes in for 3, and if it combos with head jab, then they put a card from their hand on top of their deck. So exact same idea as 1-2 punch.
What about the Descent and Gustway Bonds of Ancestry line? What do you think about that in Benji?
I think you still want it. I think in particular, you really want Mask of Many Faces to enable bonds. I actively want 1 bonds in my Benji deck, even more if I can get it, but like at least 1 bonds. And I think that even just the gust wave is fine. Like it's like slightly below rate leg tap, but if you're getting a bonds to combo off of it, it just ends up not mattering. When you're drafting bonds, you do need to make sure that you have ideally like some of the 3 for 0 3 blocks. So like all those combo enders that we were just talking about, recoil, 1-2 punch, and back heel kick. You want to have like ideally like one of them, a whole bunch of copies, so that you can easily tutor bonds. But I think like looking for that is really important. And I'm pretty high on Descendant Gust Wave in general because you're pretty good at getting yellow Be Like Waters. And if you just go, like, again, like your efficient play line of Kodachi, Kodachi, Be Like Water, naming Surging Strike, so you've presented 4 damage, and then you come in with a red Gust Wave for 6, that's a 3 card 10. So again, doing that like chip damage into 6 power attack that's demanding blocks is just exactly what you want to be doing. The yellow is like also totally fine as like it's like less good, but I still think it's actually totally fine because it's still like a 3 card 9. It's like an unblockable starter. And I think even the blue is like, I'd rather have 0 cost 3 blocks, but it being a blue that can be a head jab is pretty good. Pretty good. I don't know.
I haven't thought of it that way. But you're right. A Descending Gust Wave, if you have a Surging Strike in front, turns into a 0 for 3. Yeah, you know what? That is pretty good.
Yeah, and I think in particular, I kind of actively like having it because not only can it be a head jab, but it enables you to get it off of bonds earlier because like it's hard to get multiple copies of red gust wave, but if you're like more open to picking, like maybe you have like a 1 red 1 yellow 1 blue, and if you manage to line up some kind of turn where like maybe earlier in the game you've done your blue gust wave and then you can use your Mask of Many Faces to come in with the descendant for 4, sorry, you go like Be Like Water, descendant gust wave for 4, bonds naming Surging Strike, get the last ascendant gust wave for 5, like you're doing a turn that's pushing like 16 plus damage almost every time. And most of my like both of my Benji decks that felt strong were doing this. And I think that like having multiple gust waves almost regardless of the color was really strong, is provided that you have the bonds and the mask to go with it.
That's fair. I haven't actually had a broken Benji deck yet. I think all my Benji decks were like a little bit too fair, and they ended up being like the 3 life mattered, and I ended up losing with them. But yeah, I think having that Bonds of Ancestry and multiple Descendant Gust Waves to like push over the top is gonna be pretty important. I guess a common question is, would you want to go first or second in Benji?
This is such an interesting question, and I thought I had it figured out with first, and now I just don't know. I think I think against Assassin, going first, especially if it's Azuri, going first is quite good because they can't hit you back. And maybe against Azalea, it's also good. I don't know if you want to go first against Riptide. I went first against Riptide and Armory the other day, and I was like trying to Kodachi and chip them. They ended up like triggering a trap and doing a damage to me. Then they reloaded a an infecting shot using the Riptide ability because they played the trap, and then they just got to use their Seeker's equipment to stop my what would have been unblockable damage. And then with the floating, they just put an aim counter on their infecting shot, and then on their turn, they went Seek Horizon, put a card on top, 440, go again, play a pump, infecting shot for 9. And I was just like, I can't win this game. You're attacking me for 13 with a blood rod, and my hand blocks 8. Like what am I doing? Like I just instantly lost. So
That's pretty funny because that's exactly the Riptide deck that we were trying out during the Sunday, like the multiple the day we drafted multiple times. That was the conclusion that we came up with the Riptide, is that you want to go second against Benji as Riptide, and you want to do exactly the Seeker's equipment to block the Kodachi, flip it up with to activate either the Barcast way to load, or to flip it up if you can use a defense reaction in hand. And I guess someone actually did all of that to you, and that's pretty funny, honestly, because we were just talking about that on Sunday. That
yeah,
was probably like a line that's gonna be very powerful against honestly anyone.
yeah. Shout out to Augustine who pulled this off against me and was one of the people you're drafting with, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would be careful going first into Riptide. And similarly, I don't know if you want to go first into the ninjas. Like, it's close. It's close. I haven't played enough to say, but I think there's something to be said for being the first one to attack and get tempo, because Benji starts to get really scary in the late game. And if you can get them like even kind of to like 8, like everything they kind of have to start blocking, because it's really easy for you to start pushing Kodachi, start pushing like 2 unblockable damage, and just suddenly like everything you're doing becomes super problematic for them. And you're pretty good, like you're surprisingly good at grinding out the end game. Like I think if you can be on relatively low, like similar life totals, and they're getting low versus Katsu, I think that Benji's endgame is actually stronger because of the unblockable and because you get like the random +1 from his abilities. So yeah, Benji's like surprisingly good at playing this kind of like chip you out longer game plan, provided you have the 3 blocks and you can like get to that point and not just be dead because you have 17 life. So
Yeah, it's I think against Benji, if you're at 4 life, you're probably dead. Like if you're not ripping out Benji's whole hand, and while you're at 4 life, you're probably gonna get Kodachi locked and having to block every Kodachi they attack with, and that's just not a spot you can win through.
yeah. And like sometimes even if they give you like 2 cards, like they give you 2 cards and they go like 1-1-2, and it's just like, man, like, like what do I do? Like
Yeah, it's so true. Or like it's like at 4 life, when they attack you with the first Kodachi, do you block it or not? It's just like, huh.
yeah, it becomes really tough, and I think you need to be pretty careful. So I think that like as Benji, you want to find a way to get them down low quickly. Having a big turn is a great way to do it, and three blocks actually play really well in the deck. If you have a bunch of three blocks, it's very, very strong. And I think you might want to go second more than you think. And I think it comes down to like how aggressive the deck you're playing against is. If they can push a lot of damage, I think you'd rather just go second and get tempo and force them to start blocking. Because of the threat of that low life threshold, it makes it really untenable for people to just like take 7 off of your back heel kick. Like they just can't really afford you because they're in lethal range in like 1 to 2 turns if they do.
Okay. I think a question would be how many damage or how much unblockable damage do you think you need to do as Benji to be like wanting to go first? So like under my like at least like theory, if you're doing like 2 unblockable damage to your opponent, all you're doing is like making the game 18-17 and then your opponent gets to go second. So like I don't know if that's worth it. So like at what point does it become pretty good to go first as Benji, and like how much life do you really need to chip away from your opponent to make it feel like, oh yeah, I'm doing it going first with Benji.
I think it might be like around 4. If you can do about 4 and an arsenal, you have to get the arsenal. If you don't get the arsenal, it's no good. But if you can do about 4 and arsenal, it feels okay. I think if you ever get more than 4, it's really good. But it's pretty hard because like your opponent knows that you're playing Benji, and so they're going to block your Kodachis, and you kind of like let them mulligan. You're also in this like weird spot of like sometimes like maybe you have like two power things. So the first one hits, the second one would be coming in for 3. So you actually kind of like have to Kodachi and let them mulligan in order to get your next attack down to 2 power again. So yeah, going first is like it's like kind of awkward. I think it's like actively pretty good against the assassins if you can get in like 3 to 4 damage. But I think that against the fast decks, like I might just like going second, honestly.
Yeah, I think at least me and Clay were talking about this, and we're like, yeah, I think you just want to go second as Benji because you need to push damage, and if you go first and your opponent attacks you too hard and you have to block, or if you just like end up like not blocking and taking like 8+ damage, you go to 9 life, and it's gonna be pretty hard to come back from that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that.
Okay, let's move on and talk about Katsu.
So for Katsu, I'm going to say that I haven't actually drafted Katsu yet. I know that you have. I have some ideas about what Katsu could look like, but I think largely I'm going to be leaning on you for that. So one of Katsu's big advantages is that he has 20 life. And I think the one deck that I see that I think everybody sees is just the super surging strike version is what I've called it, where you have like all the surging strikes, all the gust waves, you have a bunch of bonds. And like I think when you have that deck, you probably just have the most powerful thing you can be doing in the format. I think that with surging and bonds and mask of many faces, like you can pretty easily push 15 to 20 damage in a hand. And when you do that, like because Kodachis are so strong, you pretty much just take over the game. So I think that this is going to be like one of the strongest decks in the format, but I also think that everybody understands how good bonds and surging line is. So like this deck doesn't come together that much.
Yeah, I think like the surging bonds gust wave is a classic constructed thing that people are doing right now. Like,
Yeah.
and it's like pretty powerful. When you do that in draft with less life total and like with a slightly smaller deck, so you actually just draw these cards like faster and more consistently, it's quite unfair. And I think I agree with you. If you get this thing together, it's gonna be broken. But this will depend on if you will ever get past the red bonds of ancestry or not. And from my experience, or at least with the pods I've been playing with, I've been in these spots where we're like, because this is like practice for the pro tour, everyone's like playing to win, playing to like, no one's like rare drafting or anything like that. So a lot of the times it goes like, what did you like end up not playing in your deck? And then the assassin player is like, oh, I have this like really bad cards that's not playable, and there's like, but I have this bonds of ancestry that I like first picked. And then like the ranger player is like, yeah, like there's like 2 cards I'm not playing. It's a bonds of ancestry that I like pack 2 pick 1 because I can't beat this card. And I'm like the ninja player, and I'm like, well, I got past the blue Bonds of Ancestry and didn't open any of the other ones. So this is still good, but it's like not exactly where I wanted to be. I wanted to have the red ones, and like blue one's still good. It's still blue pitch, blocks 3, it attacks for way too much, but like I'm not getting the multiple Bonds of Ancestry deck that I'm like hoping for a lot of the times. And the if there's like two ninja players, everyone's fighting for Surging Strikes pretty highly, and the Red Descendant Gust Waves pretty highly. So like when there's two ninja players that are both picking these cards highly, both both decks get slightly diluted. That's like it's really hard to get the super surging version that you're talking about.
Yeah, I haven't had it come together. Like I'm sure that it does happen, and like when you do, it's going to be disgusting. But yeah, I think if people are drafting their seat correctly, most of the time this won't come together. And maybe the only time it will be is if like maybe Ninja is just like very weak in pack one, where like it's open, but the cards being opened aren't especially powerful. So Ninja's actually underdrafted at the table, and then the surgings and gust waves and bonds start coming out, and people are like more scrapping on playables. In that spot, if you're like the only Ninja drafter, then yeah, you probably get this deck. But most of the time, not going to happen.
The version of the deck I actually ended up drafting near the like more recently is actually just like as many 3 block ninja cards as I can get, and the very consistent go again attacks. I'm not talking about things like head jab where it's like a 0 for 3 where it's like on rate, but like honestly, it's not above rate. I'm talking about cards like Spinning Wheel Kick, that's like a 1 for 4. Talking cards like Twin Twister, which is a 1 for 4 go again. I'm gonna be picking these cards highly, and then every 3 block I can find. So Come to Fight in any color, honestly. Back Heel Kick in every color. I'm gonna get 1-2 punches in any color, recoil in any color, just like as many 3 blocks I can get. So then I can be doing the thing of block for 6, pitch a blue 0, Kodachi Kodachi, spring load for 5, and consistently having this like 13 damage or 13 value turn cycle, which I think is like very hard to beat in this format.
Yeah, all of that makes a lot of sense to me. That you can just it's kind of like the I feel like this archetype or this way of drafting Katsu was really common in WTR. And I wasn't sure if it would be because of the lack of 3 blocks. But yeah, if you seek them, I've noticed that if you seek them out and ninja, like there's 2 ninjas in the pod, you can actually get a pretty good density of these 3 blocks.
Yeah, it was really funny where in one of my drafts I fed the player to my left who I'm passing to like a red descendant gust wave because I'm like this card doesn't hit for 1 for 5 and this card doesn't block for 3. I'm gonna pick a blue back heel kick and I'm gonna pass the descendant gust wave, and then he ended up with like a 6 descendant gust wave deck because I was just giving it all to him, but my deck just had like 15, 16 3 blocks, just and then the non 3 blocks were all like spinning wheel kicks and twin twister and spring loaded the 0 cost blues. So like all of my offensive turns I'm hitting for 7, and I ended up 3-0ing the pod because my deck was just like significantly more consistent, and my opponents weren't presenting these like 13-point turn cycles where I was doing 13 or 14-point turn cycles with like red looking for a scraps because all of my 0 blue blocks are also 1 power, and like the deck basically came down pretty solidly. And I feel like if you can get enough 3 blocks, and if you think the people in the draft pod is going to be passing you these ninja 3 blocks like yellow back heel kicks, I think this is a real deck.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'm just hearing you talk about it. I'm pretty sold on this. This sounds pretty good. Um, I'm curious, are you playing cards like does Come to Fight fit in this deck because it blocks three? Like, are you happy just to have three blocks that you're like not as interested in playing, or is it like some colors of Come to Fight? Like, what about these like non ninja three blocks?
Yeah, every three block. Anything that says that has the three value on the bottom right hand corner of your card that is legal to play a ninja is I am very happy to play. Red come to fight is great. Yellow come to fight is a little bit mediocre, but honestly, it's still blocks for three. And when you get the three block value of it against like either other ninjas or um other other rangers, it feels great. And particularly come to fight doesn't get debuffed by spider's bite. So this is actually like the premium three block you need against the assassins anyways. So come to fight premium in this deck. I would almost Come to Fight is one of those cards where I'm like pretty happy to pack one, pick one if like there's no like overly broken card in the pack, just because it goes pretty well in all six heroes, or it's like a safe card to like I'm not unhappy with a blue Come to Fight in any of the six heroes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that as much as Ninja does want to have like mostly zero cost blues, I think if you have a couple of ones that have a resource cost, if they're good enough cards, is worth it. Like if it's like a three block like come to fight, I'd be pretty happy to play that. Even in Benji, honestly, it's pretty decent. Bonds of Ancestry is obviously really good. And I think even Descendant Gust Wave, like I was talking about earlier, has a place. So I think that there are some blue non-zeros that are worth it, but you just don't want too many of them.
I think particularly for the exact version of the deck I'm talking about, I actually don't count the one cost blue cards as my blue pitch. I just that actually gets sorted into a pile that's like is a three block pile. And same with like yellow back heel kick is like that's I'm typically not attacking with it and I'm typically not pitching it. So it just is in a pile of like this is purely a three block card in my deck pile. And because of that, I think this version of the deck ends up with like 12 or 13 blues. Whereas, like, because these one cost blues, it doesn't really count towards your blue count because you can't swing Kodachi with it. And you don't actually play that many two cost cards. So if it's not a zero cost blue that you're pitching, you're going to be in a really bad spot.
Yeah, that does. And I guess, yeah, I didn't explicitly say it, but I also feel the same way that when I say like eight, maybe seven blues, like maybe seven blues if you have a bunch of yellows in Benji is okay. But I think that, you really do want to have like seven, at least seven zero cost blues. I'm not really counting the one cost towards that, but you can include like a couple of extra blues that are one cost.
And I guess same question. Do you think Katsu goes first or second?
Jeez, I have no idea. I'm gonna guess. Ooh, yeah, I'm not sure. I would guess that going second. I feel like going second is pretty strong in Ninja because you gotta just start chipping with Kodachis and demanding cards with your like efficient attacks, and it just kind of like lets you start out on the game plan that I think you want to be doing, which is making people block. Um, but I don't know. Is that true for Katsu as well?
Yeah, I'm inclined to pick second with Katsu most of the time. The only time I would pick first is maybe against Benji if I think the game is gonna be if I think or if I think or know that my Benji player can like push 5+ damage on turn one, where there was a situation where I was like, oh, I know that he has, multiple red short and sharps. There was literally a game where the Benji went first, did 7 damage unblockable, and I lost. Like it's just like, oh, I take 7, go to 13. I couldn't block, couldn't mulligan, and the game's over, right? So
Yeah.
but typically, yeah, just go second. I think any hero that can use all four cards in their going second is a hero that you want to go. Sorry, how do I say this better? I think you want to go second if you are a hero that can convert all four cards in your hand efficiently.
Yeah. Because like assassin, you can spiders bite and it's okay. Like spiders bites are like they're better. They're definitely better than one damage, but they're also not. They're not Kodachis.
Yeah, exactly. Or like if you're like a ranger and sometimes you go second and you can't actually like if you don't have any pumps, you just have like a 4 arrow hand. The best you can do is like load fire arsenal. And then you still have like a dead card in your hand. You're only drawing 3 cards, and that feels pretty bad.
I think for Rangers specifically, also, is if you have Falcon Wings, I think going second gets kind of better if you have multiple red Falcon Wings. Because if you're ever able to load a Falcon Wing on turn zero, it's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, it's that can go a long way, honestly.
Yeah, you just like get this free head job, and yeah, pretty good. Maybe one last thing about Katsu before we wrap up Katsu that doesn't really fit into any of our sections, but I was asking people about their sweet limited interactions, and this came up as one of the responses, and now it's just stuck in my head. Is that you can do some really cool stuff in Katsu with spinning wheel kick, in particular with the combo text, which says that if a combo if twin twisters or spinning wheel kick was the last attack on the combat chain, this gets +1, and when this hits, put it to the bottom of its owner's deck. What's really cool about this card is, or what's really cool about this is that like if you do like a twin twisters that gets blocked out and then you spinning wheel kick and it hits, you can actually bottom this card and then tutor the same spinning wheel kick with Katsu. So that's something that's like not necessarily intuitive, and I don't think it's going to come up very much because you have to have like the combo card and then the spinning wheel kick. But just be aware that because it goes to the bottom and it's a hit trigger and Katsu is also a hit trigger, you can order it so that you put the spinning wheel kick onto the bottom and then Katsu it, and then it like combos with itself, which is I think really strong because like it's hard to get this card in multiples, but if this ever comes in for 5 and 5, it's just like it's pretty gross. So I think you should be aware of that, like both playing as Katsu and playing against it. That like this combo on hit is really really scary.
I didn't even think of that. Maybe I would have found it if the situation like came up, but that sounds gross.
Yeah, like your opponent can prevent this from happening, but just like I wanted to mention it as a line to look out for, like on both sides, because I think it's like if this ever happens, is going to be like a
It's game
huge
ending.
deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it might just like win the game. So something to keep in mind.
So a comboed spinning wheel kick with your opponent having 1 resource and 1 card in hand is a must block. Got it.
Assuming that they haven't already hit with their Katsu trigger. If they've already Katsu triggered, it doesn't matter. So that's why it is like a little bit niche, but still pretty strong.
Yeah, that sounds honestly. I'm looking for 1 for 5 somehow in this format, and I guess spinning wheel kick is a 1 for 5 go again. That's broken.
Yeah, yeah. If you ever combo it, it's pretty powerful. Okay, maybe wrapping up here. Let's talk about how do you find yourself getting into Ninja? Like, so yeah, what are your drafts where you're drafting Ninja usually like?
So I guess the card that's like mainly pulling me towards Ninja would be for both Benji and Katsu is Bonds of Ancestry and Mask of Many Faces. These are like if you can get a early Bonds or early Mask, I would be looking to see if Ninja is open or sending a signal that Ninja is cut. Like if I can get Bonds of Ancestry early and like a spinning wheel kick or Bonds of Ancestry into like a surging strike, reds, then that is like a spot that would be like ideal in moving into Ninja for me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think those are like the most premium reasons to get into Ninja. I talked about Mask of Many Faces a little bit, but this card is just ridiculous. Like, the biggest thing about this card is it allows bonds to be live very easily, but it also allows Gust Wave to be live easily, and it also lets you do like double Gust Wave turns sometimes. Like, sometimes you can go, like, if you get the natural Surging, Descendant, Gust Wave bonds, you can name, sometimes you can just name Surging Strike on the Bonds of Ancestry and then like go grab another Descendant Gust Wave and come in for 5 again. And it's just super, super, super gross. Just enabling these like weird combo lines that you can't normally do just lets you be way above rate. and it's just Blade Break 1. Like like you can also just block with it. The card is absurd. I would be very happy first picking it. I think it's the best equipment in the set by a lot. I think a lot of the equipment in this set is like not so good. I think this card is nuts.
Yeah, I agree. I think Mask is the best equipment in the set. Like it's common equipment in the set.
Yeah,
I did get the privilege of opening a Flick Knives and playing with it. Okay, nothing beats Flick Knives, but Mask of Many Faces is the best common equipment in the set.
yeah, and I don't think it's particularly close. Like I think it is head and shoulders above everything else. Honestly, at common.
Yeah. Is there any like commons that would pull you towards ninjas?
Yeah, I might consider cards like Red Surging Strike, Red Descendant Gust Wave, maybe even Red Twin Twisters. I think are all reasons to draft Ninja at common, specifically the Reds. So, and the way I kind of think of this is like your unconditional go agains, like your go again starters that cost one or more are the ones you want. Like you don't really want to be getting into Ninja for the head jabs, but you do want to be getting into it for any of the ones that cost resources. And I think for me, Gust Wave is like maybe not the highest pick, but I'm pretty happy picking an early Gust Wave just because of like the ease of like it gives you the option of being in the really nutty Katsu deck if it's open, and it also gives you just like I think it's really easy for Benji to make Gustaway work. And so it's like a pretty big pull into Benji. And I'm pretty happy to speculate on it if there's like nothing else better to be taking.
Are you ever picking, let's say, like a yellow head jab, like early? If you're like, if you know you're probably like, maybe not early, but like you know you're probably a ninja, and if you have a choice between like moving towards Benji direction or Katsu direction, do you have a preference on which one you want to move into right now?
Um, I think, I guess I haven't tried your mid rangey version. I think that if I can get like the super surgeon Katsu, that's going to be the higher priority. But I think that, like, interestingly, I don't think you necessarily have to decide super early. Like, I think that you can kind of wait a little bit to get the yellow Be Like Waters and the yellow Twin Twisters. Like maybe around picks like 5, 6, 7 is where I'm starting to want to take them. Like, I'm not taking them super highly, but if I'm if I already like if I have a Descendant Gust Wave and a Mask of Many Faces, and then there's like, and maybe I pick up like a blue 3 block 0 cost. I think those are also like pretty high picks. Once you're already a ninja, if I have like a good start like that, and then there's like a yellow Be Like Water, I'm like, yeah, okay, that seems pretty solid. Like I'm pretty happy to do that and start leaning a little towards Benji. But I want to have like the other strong cards first. I don't want to be getting into the deck for Be Like Water or Head Job.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense to me.
And I think also other reasons to be in this deck at rare is Red Bleed Out. We talked a lot about that card. Very, very good. And also Spinning Wheel Kick at red is also super good. So again, just those like unconditional go agains that cost resources are pretty strong. I think Head Leads the Tail, if you ever open it at Majestic, is also really good. It's the 1 for 3 where you name a card and it gives the next thing +1. This is a leg tap, essentially.
Yeah, and if you get lucky, maybe five.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, any of the like unconditional starters that cost resources, that's where you want to be at red.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
There is sort of like one exception to this heuristic, and or two exceptions, and that maybe moves us nicely into the next section, which is underperformers. I think the 1 cost go agains that you don't want are the ones that don't combo with anything, and those are Deadly Duo, which is it's like at red it's a 3 for 1, and if it hits, your next thing that has base 2 attack gets +2. And similarly, I think you don't really want Plunge, which is the 1 for 3 go again on hit. Your next dagger gets +1. I think that these cards are like okay at red, but they're not like, I'm not excited about playing these cards in my deck. They're not cards I like. If I could choose how my draft deck is built, it would not include these cards. That's what I'll say about it. I think they're playable, but they're not like they're pretty fillerish.
Yeah, that's fair. So I guess a common, if somebody is like looking to draft Benji and they want to put yellow deadly duos in their deck because it is a one cost, two unblockable, and then the next attack gets +2 and +1 from Benji, so +3. What do you think about that?
It's so mediocre. I think it's like a little bit of a trap. I think you can play a yellow deadly duo. Like I don't think it's the worst card in Benji, but it's like a 30th card for me. And the biggest thing about this is that, well, you might be able to look at this and think of it as a leg tap because it's like 1 for 2 and then you get +2. It having to target a thing with base power 2 or less is a pretty big deal. So, like, let's say that is like a head jab, and you go Kodachi, Kodachi, Deadly Duo, head jab. That's 1, 1, 2, and then your head jab gets +3 and comes in for 5. That means you're doing 9 damage off of a pitch card, Deadly Duo, and head jab, which is like fine, but also not great. Like it's slightly below rate. You're not getting 1 for your action point. And that's like one of the better scenarios for this card. If you don't have the 2 base, like I think you want to be playing reds. And if you just like don't have the 2 base to go along with this card, it doesn't block for 3 and it's just 2 damage and you don't even get the +2. And I think like when that happens, it's like really, really bad. So for those reasons, I just feel like it's like at best it's fine. And at worst, it's like 1 for 2 go again that blocks 2. And you're just like, you're really sad.
That cost 1.
That costs 1. Yeah. It's just like, yeah.
And I guess similarly with Plunge is exactly that, but it's -1 damage.
Yeah.
So
At least
yeah,
Plunge is like,
it's
Plunge is like,
consistently below rate.
yeah, like it's yeah, it's never good, but at least you can't brick on it because like you can pretty reliably Kodachi. I think maybe like I think the one line with Deadly Duo that is pretty good is this actually works with Spring Loaded. So if you can go Kodachi, Deadly Duo, Spring Loaded, that's 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's like 3 cards for 11, which is actually very good. But I think that is like the only way to go above rate on Deadly Duo that I can think of. And because of that, I don't really want to include it in my deck. But yeah, it is good with spring loaded. I guess if you have like Deadly Duo spring loaded tribal, like maybe that's a thing. But you could also just draw them in the wrong order or draw like multiple spring loaded and be sad.
Yeah, like similarly, like Feisty Locals Yellow is pretty sick with these Dudley Duo if you need to include that. Where if you buff Feisty Locals, then your opponent is like almost forced to block it, and then it gets +2, so it's like even more threatening. So like pumping Feisty Locals in general is pretty good, but then playing yellow Feisty Locals is a little bit mediocre. And coming back all the way back to the card that I did want to include is blue Feisty Locals. Pumping blue Feisty Local pretty sick.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, zero. It's a blue 1 power attacks for 3, and then your opponent's like, oh, I got to block with one card, and then it gets +2. It's solid.
Yeah, it's not bad.
It's not good, but it's not bad.
Yeah, I guess all of this is like a very long way to say Deadly Duo and Plunge kind of underperform. You can put them in your deck, but they are very much filler. They're not high picks, and don't trick yourself into thinking that they're really cool Benji cards just because they seem like they have the Benji thing going on for them, and just because Deadly Duo has Benji on the card doesn't mean it's actually good in the deck, sadly.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's just like telling you, like the card is just like screaming at you, like this is a Benji card, and it's just fine.
Okay, and just a couple of cards I want to mention that you should be avoiding if possible. And we've been talking quite a bit about needing to have about 7 blue 0 costs. There is a couple of exceptions, which would be Brush Off Blue. This card is pretty close to a trap. Like the first copy might be acceptable if you really need that blue count as a 0 cost. But if you ever are in a situation that you like have to block, this card will kill you. Like I had one of these in my deck once, and it was turn one, and my hand blocked for six, and my opponent just saw that I stopped blocking and just came at me for like 10 damage, and I was like, okay, I leak 4 or 5 damage, and I can't even use this brush off.
I see.
Just be aware that blue brush off is actively a card you want to avoid if possible. And similarly, a card called Scout the Periphery. This is just a 2 block blue card, which is significantly better than a blue brush off because it blocks for 2. But you'll basically never actually play this card as a card, so you'd rather have almost any other 0 blue card before it. So if you are in a spot where you can choose any other blue 0 cost, pick that before these 2 cards.
Yes, agree with all of that. I think that these ones are particularly bad, and then I think that the rest of them are like pretty close in power level, and then the zero pit or 0 cost 3 blocks are like significantly better. So I think those are like kind of the tiers. Like you have like the 0 cost 3 blocks, you have like most of the 2 blocks, and then you have Scout the Periphery and Brush Off being notably worse, I think.
And I guess the card we typically don't talk about mythics, but a card I just want to shout out is a card called Burdens of the Past. This is a generic action 0 cost, and it only comes in as a blue pitch, and it blocks for 3. I'll be honest, I have no idea what the card does, but it's a block 3 0 cost blue pitch. This card is great in Ninja. This is a secret ninja card that is gonna probably get passed to you, and I would be picking this card somewhat highly.
Whoa, I think this card's good. It's good
And
in
it
Assassin too. It's a blue 3 block that's not an attack. It's insane.
yeah, it doesn't get debuffed by Spider's Bite, which is an insane this card has insane amount of text for a blank card. This is a titanium bauble that doesn't get debuffed in this format, and it is actually somewhat of a high pick. And I just wanted to shout this card out because I think people underrate this card right now, and it's better than what people think.
It's kind of funny. There's actually like a bunch of these zero cost 3 block M's like Concealed Blade, Knives Out, Stab Wound, Burdens of the Past, like Dishonor. Like there's actually like a bunch of these that block 3, and they're like obviously like all pretty good. Mostly just because they're 0 cost block 3s. I guess Concealed Blade is like pretty sick because it's an attack reaction that gives stuff +1. But yeah, Stab Wound's probably pretty sick in Benji. You go like 1/1/2, but it hits for 4. It's probably pretty sick.
Yeah, it's a beautiful 0 cost blue pitch. So yeah, just don't or be aware that 3 blocks that is a 0 cost blue pitch are good in this format, and I would be picking them quite highly because they're hard to come by. Mostly if they're not attack actions.
Also, final M I want to talk about Silverwind Shuriken, 0 cost, doesn't block. It's an item, has attack reaction, destroy it, target attack with combo gains +1. I think this card's pretty bad, and you probably don't want to be including it, but it might be playable in Benji if you have a bunch of back heel kicks and you're able to combo it, because if this thing can give back heel kick +2, it's kind of funny. I don't know if it's actually good, but it seems I'd at least
No,
try it if I had it. It sounds kind of
no,
sick.
no, it's bad. It's bad, Yuki. This card's an action, Yuki. You have to use your action point to play this.
Yeah, but you have a lot of Kogan.
No.
Like,
No.
look. I would last pick it, and I'd consider putting it in my deck.
Look, the best part, the best thing about this card is that it comes in cold foil. So then when you open it, you actually don't have to, because it replaces a common slot, you don't actually have to like use a pick to pick up the $10. It just comes in like you get to keep the $10 still. Like that's the best part about this card.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this card is not great, but if you were ever going to play it, it would be because you have a bunch of back heel kicks. And even then, I think it's pretty mediocre, but
Okay. Yeah, I would stay away from this card.
I think I would too, honestly.
Okay, I
All
think
right.
that's everything we want to talk about with Ninja.
Yeah. I think overall, I've actually really been liking Ninja in this set. It just feels like I don't know. I think you do want to be like one of two Ninja drafters, but man, the Ninja decks are pretty good when they come together. Like I think they're very powerful.
Yeah, like when the ninja decks come together, or like if you're the only ninja drafter, if you're doing like less than 8 players, I don't know how anyone beats you.
Yeah.
Or if you're like Yuki and like open or get past 3 bonds of ancestry and mask to many faces, and I'm like, oh, I'm like so close to winning, and then Yuki just goes, I take whatever damage you do, and I'm like, oh, you have a 3 card hand, it can't be that bad. Descendant Gust Wave, Bonds of Ancestry number 3, and I'm like, this is not fair. Like, I can't beat the third one. Like, this is not ever possible to beat the third combo Bonds of Ancestry.
Well, I think I had to block with one of them.
Yeah, that's typically how you beat Bonds of Ancestry, is you make them block with it. And
That's
you still
true.
get value from it because it's the block 3.
Yeah, card's pretty good. Yeah. Bonds of Ancestry, Mask of Many Faces, very, very good. I know we talked about them a bunch, but honestly, cannot praise these cards enough. They're so powerful. All right. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think we talked enough about Ninja.
All right. As always, thanks for listening. Let us know in the comments if we missed anything. Is there a way of drafting Ninja that we didn't talk about that you know about? Is there cards that you disagree with? Maybe you're higher or lower on them than we are. Would love to hear about any of those in the comments. You can also reach out to us on social media. You can find Jay on Twitter at Ueda or myself on Twitter at YukiLeeBender. You can also email us directly at onthebauble@gmail.com if you'd like to send any questions or feedback there. Hope that you're all enjoying drafting this set. I think so far it seems like a really awesome limited format, and hope you've all been enjoying it. And good luck to you in your upcoming drafts.